Okay, so Neville, you missed a little bit of an introduction that I did. It's that we're gonna wait for a minute or two so that people can actually join online and then we're gonna start. I can already see we have attendees and we'll start in a minute or so. All good with you today?
Fantastic. Yeah, doing great. Thank you.
Great, amazing. And Sarah, I think you're with us, but let's try once again if we can hear you all good.
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
A little bit like robotic, so not very well.
It started really strong and then it dropped a little bit at the end, but the beginning was promising. So
Yeah.
Very realistic, real life, remote work, digital nomad problems.
Yeah, exactly. We also mentioned with Nico that we should actually elaborate a little bit more on this during the webinar, like the challenges that digital nomads are facing. Internet is one of them that it's my number one enemy, to be honest. Whenever I go somewhere, it's like almost anxiety. Is the internet gonna be okay? Am I gonna be able to pull this meeting on and so on? Surprisingly, I thought that it would never be an issue. I don't know. It's like, I don't know.
yeah, and also you start, at least with me, I start mapping in my mind the airports where the connection is good, so I know what to expect, and the ones where the connection is horrible, so I also know what to expect when I go there. But well, it is what you need to do if you want to, keep on working and traveling. You need to start making those mind maps to help you along the way, so you can be prepared for those surprises when they happen.
For sure.
Exactly. Okay, so let's kick off. I see that people are already here. And before we start with the introduction of the speakers and the idea of this webinar, I'm just going to do a minute of housekeeping for everyone that is here and everyone that registered, but it's not available online because, it's in the middle of the day. So some of you would have um, some responsibilities to do. The webinar will be recorded and the recording will be sent to every single one of you who registered for the event. As soon as we get the recording with a really nice email that my colleague from marketing will do for all of you. Then you can ask questions in the chat box anytime during the webinar. So we won't have like time for a Q&A. You can ask the questions there. I'm seeing the questions and we will make sure as speakers, the four of us, to answer them for you. And the extra one is that you can also comment in the chat. So feel free to comment, agree or disagree with us on any of the things that we will discuss. And, we will make sure that they're also mentioned here because I think I'm the only one who can see the chat. Not sure if, the participants can actually see each other's chats. If you do okay, if not, I'm gonna read them. And people are already saying hello, hi. So welcome everyone officially. Okay, so first of all, I would like to make an introduction to the four people, four including me as well, that are here as your hosts or speakers on these webinars. On this webinar, sorry, that it's about freelancers, remoters, digital nomads, and how they can work smarter and live better. Which is something that I also need to keep upskilling and learning how to do. But not to keep you waiting, let's start with our guest from Genki. Neville, I would like to start with you. Give us like 2 minutes introduction of who you are, what is your background, and so on. And later on, we'll speak more about the platform as well.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the intro. So I'm Neville. As you said, I'm one of the co-founders here at Genki. We are a health partner for digital nomads and other long-term travelers. And my background is actually as a digital nomad myself. From the US. I'm currently in Spain, and I moved out of my house on what I think started as allegedly a 6-month trip around the world in 2012, and here I am.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Sarah, let's give it a try.
Yes. Yeah, my name is Sarah. I'm
Yeah,
head
I don't
of
think
Yeah.
content.
I don't think we can actually hear you well.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
think in this case, maybe I can go next while
yeah, you
Sarah
go.
is working on her internet, maybe trying without the camera. Let's see if that
Please
works. The old trick without the video. I'm Nicholas, but more known as Nico. I'm the CRO here at Native Teams. I have been with the company for around 10 months now. Time really flies. Looks like I joined the company yesterday. I come from a very tech/fintech background. I am originally Brazilian, but I've been living in Lisbon, Portugal for the past 3 years. And yeah, this is actually my first time working in the remote space with so much focus. I'm working for a company that can actually provide solutions for digital nomads and remote workers. And I just love it because I've been working as remotely for the past 5 years, since before the pandemic. And it's really, really nice to be able to work for a company that actually other fellow remote workers and digital nomads with their own mission.
Thank you, Nico. Okay, so I'll go next, and Sarah, let me know when you're ready to try. I'm just gonna give a brief introduction of who I am and why I'm here. Although usually introduction of who I am and why I'm here. Oh. Although usually yes. Okay, so we should be good now. All right, so again, I'm Alex. Usually I'm the first one to go because of my name, but see, these are unusual circumstances where I'm not. So some of you would know me. I can see the attendees. We have some familiar faces which are always on my webinar, so thanks very much for that. For those who don't know me, I'm the co-founder of Native Teams. I've been freelancing for 5 years before Native Teams. Then somehow my title went from freelancer to remote worker. And in the meanwhile, in all of those 8 years in which I am into this, let's say, freelancing remote working world, I've been always been traveling, whether that's for personal reasons or professional reasons. I've been always on the go, always on the airports, always here and there. Meanwhile, having to make this balance in terms of work and life balance, but also travel and work balance, which was a thing at the beginning for me. Now it's not. I've made my peace with it, and it's the new how to work when you're a remote worker. But it used to be a real challenge for me. I'll be speaking why later on as we go in the flow of the webinar. But how many of you are having the challenges to make a balance of how much you work and how much you enjoy traveling as a remote worker or as a digital nomad? Let me know in the chat, and I can make sure that we actually share those experiences with you. I actually wanted to hear some of them from Sarah as well, because she has a really great history of digital nomad lifestyle. Let's give it another try. Third luck, Sarah.
I'm sorry, can you
Way better, I
hear
think.
me now?
A little
Okay.
better. Yeah.
The internet just broke down like 20 minutes ago in all my village here where I am right now. So it's like worst timing. Sorry for that. I'm Sarah. I'm head founder of a co-working. Lived here for 5 years on my own digital nomad journey, and I'm also the first traveling and working remotely now myself.
Okay, I think we can hear you a little bit better, but not clear, to be honest. But let's continue with why we're here today. As I mentioned, so the name of the event is Work Smarter, Live Better, but what that means in terms of Genki and Native Teams. Just a little bit on why we're doing this. So I would say I would start for native teams, and Nico, you can continue. Why native teams started? It's for a personal reason, and it's for something that I needed myself as a freelancer back then. And both Genki and native teams have their first customers being the people who are part of the company. In native teams case, it would be me, the very first customer of native teams, and in Genki's it would be Sarah. And Neville, you can share that story with our participants after me, how it started and why actually it started. I usually talk about why it started is because, as I mentioned, as a freelancer, I did have my challenges. Not at the beginning, because I was, I think, 24 years or something like that. So I didn't really thought about long-term investment. What does it mean to be a freelancer, remote worker? How is my career path gonna go in terms of the benefits that I might have with that, how much I earn, how I'm gonna use, how I'm gonna optimize the funds that I earn, and so on and so on. It didn't really matter at the beginning, but then as years would go, I would start to think and so on and so on, and I kind of needed a loan from a bank to buy my own apartment and so on. And there I faced some challenges, and I started asking questions around what can I do more about this? How can I actually be properly employed while having the freedom to be a freelancer? How do I not care about all of the things that the bureaucracy of my country, the legislation has? Do I have to have accountant? Do I have to have a legal team? Blah, blah, blah. And it all was like really, really mind blowing for me. And I remember back then with Jack, we kind of sat together and said, look, we want to keep working together, but I need something more than just being a freelancer. I love the freedom, I love the flexibility of it, and so on. But I kind of need some more when it comes to my employment, when it comes to how I use my funds, how I, organize that part of my life at that point. And that's how Native Team started, and that's actually why it started, so that I can enjoy the freedom of freelancing or remote working back when the legal entity of native teams happened, while somebody else, to be honest, taking care of all of the boring and time demanding, time consuming things, which is, as I mentioned, accounting and legal and invoicing and so on. And we just kind of I needed one single solution, and we decided to build it. But it is never enough. It is never enough to have all that figured out. You always have more and more benefits to add to it. And here is where Genki's story can actually come. And I would like to invite you, Neville, to tell us why you decided to go with Genki the way you're going now.
Yeah, thank you. I'd be happy to. And it is remarkably similar, right? In terms of scratching one's own itch with starting a business. So as I mentioned, I became a digital nomad back in 2012 for a lot of the same reasons you mentioned, right? Just enjoying that freedom, the classic escape the 9 to 5, escape from the cubicle, get out of that world. And for me, I got to a point where I realized like I had already been freelancing for a while. And I was already working basically remotely. We didn't call it that exactly back then. For a few years, even actually from 2007, I'd left my last office job, and I was just working from a computer, but still in the same city where I grew up. And it just dawned on me one day, like, wait a minute, if I can do this work from here, I can do this from anywhere. And I think a lot of other people, especially in software development, digital marketing, like these kind of classic fields, had similar realizations at the same time, and we became sort of the early digital nomads. And from a tech perspective, Wi-Fi, laptops, mobile, like all of these things, Zoom calls that we're on right now, Slack, like all the tools are there to enable you to actually do the work, and to, internet issues notwithstanding, which still happen, more or less you can work from all over the world.
Yeah.
And then around the time that I started, there started to also be other services, things like Airbnb, and more banks like N26 and Revolut, and all of these different services started to pop up that actually made it possible for you to live like a relatively complete normal life around the world. You could travel around the world, you could do your work if you had some sort of like freelance arrangement or remote work, and you could have a bank, and you could have, again, some semblance of life. But what my co-founder Mark, who became a nomad in 2018, realized is that like, and something I experienced on my own journey, was that while all of those services exist, and while it is now possible to sort of live and travel around the world, the one thing that you sacrifice in the process of doing that potentially is your health, because everything around health becomes much more complicated when you spend a significant period of time outside of your home country. Everything from, say, like finding a doctor if you need one, to something as simple as like eating well, keeping up with healthy routines, exercising. If you're changing countries every few weeks, as some nomads are, or even every few months, or even if you're like an expat and you live long-term in another country, you still don't tend to have all the support systems from like family and friends you can call on when you're sick, a doctor who knows your history, who knows all of like the medicines and vaccines and other things that you've had in the past. Like none of that is there for you. You have Wi-Fi, you can do your work, you have your laptop, but everything health becomes more complicated and more difficult. And so we started Genki really with a mission to help digital nomads and other long-term travelers take care of their health wherever they go around the world. So you don't have this choice between, hey, I want to live this fun, interesting lifestyle, and I want to be healthy, that you can do both of those at the same time. That's really the origin story. Sarah, who unfortunately is having some connection issues, was actually one of the, or the first, besides Mark, my co-founder, the first Genki customer. And well, let me hand it back to you there. I know there's a bunch of stuff we can get into.
Yeah, we can definitely. Thank you for that. I just wanted to then ask a couple of questions to both of you. First, let's start with the challenges. Despite the internet, that could be a challenge, and we've seen it. What are the most common challenges that freelancers and remote workers are facing on one side of things? But let's not forget their employers on the other side of things, because if we have freelancers and remote workers, they must have people that they're working for, whether that's official or it's not official. Nico, let's start from your experience. What are the most common challenges that these people are facing nowadays?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Alex. And I love the story. Neville, I haven't heard the story about how the company came to be. And this is a really interesting point of view, because if you think about it, as you mentioned, you have everything ready to become a digital nomad. You know where you want to go, you have the tools, you have the job. But the health aspect is so important that might keep you from doing it, right? And once you start thinking of it, look, what if something happens, or if I need the support and there's not going to be one, yeah, maybe I'll just stay at home, right? So this is a very interesting challenge to tackle. And I would say that the second thing, at least for us on our perspective, of course, from native teams, that can also generate that sense of fear of why I shouldn't become a digital nomad, is tax and finance, right? How am I going to be able to manage my taxation or manage my finances living abroad in a different region, in a different country? And even if you think from an employer standpoint, as Alex mentioned, if it is a company that is working with digital nomads or have remote workers, for example, in more than one location, it can be really tricky to go into those topics, right? And tax in specific is that kind of topic that no one wants to talk about, right? The less I see it, the better, because the more I see it, more scared I become, or more challenging it is, right? But it's extremely important. And the way that we see in terms of challenges that digital nomads, employers, and remote workers have with tax is mainly the same, because the challenge comes from not knowing, right? The lack of knowledge of how legislation works for taxation, but also for employment. And this is really tough, because if you think about from the employer perspective, if you have employees in more than one location, it's already very challenging. Even with one location, understanding the legalities and the way that employment works or taxation works in one location is very tricky. Imagine having 5, 10 different locations to take care of. And it's the same thing, for example, for digital nomads or remote workers, because as you mentioned, they might be moving between different countries every week, every month, or every year. And having that understanding, it's also really important for them from many different countries at once. I'm Brazilian. Our legislations in Brazil when it comes to employment are very, very complicated. So I come from a very challenging market when it comes to legislation for employment. And I think that is a perspective that even when I'm trying to explain how that works for other people, it is hard, right? And I think this is one of the main things that we have been trying to tackle, is how can we make that knowledge more accessible for employees, for digital nomads, for remote workers and employers. So we kind of demystify what tax and finance management is for these people. It's not that hard to understand. once we break it down in a way that everyone can consume. So this is whenever, new digital nomads or employers are coming to us, one of their main pain points is, look, I need to hire someone in this location. I'm working with a digital nomad in this location, or the digital nomad itself coming to us from a specific location, really not knowing where they sit financially and tax-wise. And this is, for us, have been one of our main pain points that we have seen on those companies.
Great.
Yeah, a lot of that. Oh, I was just because
Yeah.
a lot of that resonates from my perspective. I've been through it now on all sides, right? Freelancing, and then working with a remote team, both as part of the team, right? And then also, yeah, hiring people and needing to, and then dealing with all of the compliance and everything. And I think a lot of the challenges, both that you mentioned and on the health side, there are a lot of things that, like, if you're doing something for a short time and not at much scale, so if you're one person and you're working from another country for a couple of weeks or even a month or something like that, you can kind of sort of get by without services like ours, right? You can just, you don't become tax resident. The authorities aren't really looking into it. If you're just there for a short time, you can probably get by on like a simple business or tourist visa. But when you start to have a team and you have multiple people, or just as an individual, if you're going 6 months, if you're traveling constantly, if you're living out of your home country for a year, none of that sort of like, well, let me just stay with everything registered at home and then, hope nothing bad happens in the case of health, or hope I don't need to go to the doctor, or hope the tax man doesn't come asking questions or whatever. It doesn't work over a longer period. And I think that's why services like ours became necessary in this world where it's possible now to live and travel longer term, to be an employer in one country and to have employees in another country in situations like that.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree, Neville. And I think you have more experience than me as a digital nomad, so I think you can testify to that. Sometimes, though, most of the times, actually, those decisions, they are not planned, right? You arrive to a place that you really like and you decide to stay for longer, but you are not preparing to stay there for longer. So everything is a mystery, from the language and the way of life, but also when it comes to the health, taxation, financials. And that's where you see that, look, I need to understand what I'm getting myself into. And it's not something that it's planned most of the times.
Yeah, exactly. I mentioned like kind of scratching our own itch with Genki as a product. And so obviously insurance existed long before Genki, and there are other types of like travel insurance and international insurance that existed. But one of the pain points I experienced for me as a nomad, I was traveling and I would go to sign up for some kind of travel health insurance that could cover me theoretically as an American living abroad or traveling abroad. But the first question they would ask is like, when are you leaving? Where are you going? How long are you staying? And when are you coming back? And I'm like, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, and I don't know. And that's the whole fun of it, right? And even for people who do know, they're in the kind of traditional world, there tends to be a traditional insurance world in this case, tend to be a lot of like, oh, you can only stay in each country for 28 days, or you can only be outside your home country for 90 days, and all sorts of restrictions that are just frankly incompatible with this lifestyle. And we see that in like employment law and visas and things like that as well, that like the trend of people becoming digital nomads and becoming remote workers and being able to move around is sort of ahead of where the kind of like legal framework is and where most of the medical systems are, that they work in this category of like, you're an immigrant, you've moved to the country, you're planning to live here forever and things like that, and they expect you in the local system. Whereas for most of the people that we're dealing with, they're not, in the local system, they're not living there forever, they're not necessarily on an immigrant visa and situations like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Nico, since you've been dealing with, as we mentioned, the whole revenue team in native teams, how is the demand of remote and global workforce increased?
Yep, I think I got you.
In
Alex?
which sectors is it increasing the most?
Yeah, so we have seen a lot of increase, of course, in global workforce and remote working demand. Something that I don't want to keep on going back to the pandemic because this created a whole different market for everything, right? But what we have seen in terms of numbers is that the remote working market, if we can call it this way, a remote workforce market, even if we compare to where we were at before the pandemic, has already grown a lot and it keeps on growing, right? We experienced a inorganic growth during the pandemic, but the scars that the pandemic left, or this new way of living, that really stick. And we're seeing that companies and people, they got used to the way of living, and we can see the effects on that on the remote landscape today. And what most companies want to do now, and this is something that are very technical from our perspective with employers, for example, is that they had their first contact with EOR services back when the pandemic started, right? EOR was not really a big thing before that. We had some companies providing EOR services, PO, or helping those companies manage remote workforce, but it was very strict and very a very niche market. And then after the pandemic, EOR became a whole thing, right? And everything that comes with that. And right now, what happens is that those companies, they are now knowledgeable regarding EOR. They know what they want. They know what to expect. It's not their first time experiencing managing remote workers or dealing with EOR services. So the demand is there. It is as high as it has ever been, if you exclude the pandemic time. But at the same time, the consumers, the companies, and even the employees, they are more demanding because they know what they want now. They know how this works. And this is really, really nice because it allows us to really understand what's coming next, right? We got the basics done. We understand how to work with them, how to provide the best service possible when it comes to EOR, but what's coming next. And I think Native Teams, it's in a very unique position in this space because we have a value proposition for companies. We help those companies with hiring and employing the remote workforce. But at the same time, we work really closely with the individuals, digital nomads, remote workers, employees, and we are always trying to listen to their pain points and what they have to say on both sides, from both POVs. And this allows us to combine things a little bit because sometimes they're looking for the same thing. Health insurance is something that both of them are looking, but from different perspectives, right? For the individuals, a product from Genki is super essential, and sometimes having a product that is designed to what I need is what they're looking for, right? I don't want another global health insurance service because they might not understand who I am and what I do. It's what you're saying, Neville. The questions they might ask for me are not really, they're not going to understand what I'm trying to say. And then for the employers, they want to make sure that they're providing wellness and a good work environment for their remote workers. And I think everyone is learning how to create that kind of environment on a remote workspace. So I think the challenge now is how to combine the both of them, is what we have been striving to do ever since the beginning. But yes, the demand is still growing, and I feel like it's more mature. Companies and employees and the remote workers, they know what they want instead of just, jumping on new solutions just because it's new.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't agree more with that. And Neville, on your side, because healthcare is such a fundamental benefit that you can get. So how is that actually improving the employee happiness and make them stay in a remote work environment, in your experience?
Yeah, well, echoing what Nico said, I mean, I think everything did change with the pandemic, right? It is a cliche, but it's very true, and especially in our industry, right? So the same point we were talking about before, where you've had people like us who've been traveling and living in this way for over a decade now. But basically, we existed in some gray area that like employers didn't really want to know about. They didn't think about it. It wasn't something they wanted to deal with. And then governments and all that also we just fell completely outside of like what they could make. I mean, even for me here in Spain, when I arrived the first time 4 years ago, right, just before the pandemic, the idea that I was like here and I had income, but I wasn't retired and I didn't have a Spanish job just did not compute. Like if I went and talked to like a local lawyer or anybody like that and tried to explain this idea that like, I'm not a retired person from England. I don't have a job in Spain, but yes, I do make money. This is just like, but this doesn't make sense. Like how is that possible? And so what we've seen since then, that not only are there a ton of remote jobs now, but 50 countries or more now have launched digital nomad visas. And so like a lot of these things that existed kind of at the margins or only like unofficially in the past are now like part of a country's tourism budget. Employers are offering these as benefits, as you mentioned. So, I mean, I think that's the big change in terms of the last few years. As far as healthcare specifically, yeah, again, I think it's this idea that as an individual, in the past, people either didn't become nomads or remote workers, or they felt they needed to make a big sacrifice in order to do that. And so you knew that you weren't going to be able to get that mortgage because you didn't have a salary on paper when in the local place that you were, or you weren't going to have health insurance, or you worked for, say, an American company and they gave you US insurance, even though you don't live in the US, but they're based in the US, or something like that. Like you were just kind of like, off to the side and not really considered within benefits. And now, as more and more companies have remote teams and are able to employ both full-on employees, but often freelancers working through an organization like yours, or sometimes directly, they are expecting more and they're expecting benefits, and they no longer sort of feel like the kind of second class citizen within the company. I think there was a statistic I'm not sure where the original survey was. It might have been MBO Partners, but it was cited in Forbes recently that 80% of employees who are looking for a new job said that it was important for their next job to give them the freedom to live anywhere. That sounds high to me, but I think the sentiment is in the right direction. Like especially within tech, but increasingly in more industries, the sort of cream of the crop best workers who can demand the most benefits, the highest salaries, the ones that all the companies are competing for, they know that. And one of the benefits that they are looking for is this ability to live and work anywhere. And they don't want to sacrifice the rest of the benefits like retirement planning and their health, certainly, for the ability to do that.
Yeah. And in Genki now in the platform, like what is your strategy for prioritizing what you're gonna offer as a package in the health insurance? What is the strategy of how do you prioritize that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
if I can just, sorry, Nico, if I can just,
Please.
because you mentioned something really important on your last speech, is that I think I saw a report from 2022 from McKinsey and Company about, the new market for remote work and remote workforce. And that's something that they mentioned that I think goes in hand with what you were explaining, that the high paid or the senior professionals, they don't want to let go of their lifestyle even after the pandemic ended, right? If they're working remotely, if they're digital nomads, and of course these are senior professionals, very specialized, where companies are fighting to get those professionals. They're not ready to let go of that, to come back to the office or be stuck in one specific country, just be able to get a job, right? They can get jobs anywhere in any company. So they actually have the power on their hands, which is in a way forcing companies, if they didn't have that mindset before, to really adjust to that way of working, if they want to have a chance of keeping or having those professionals working with them. So I just wanted to compliment, because I think that the research we're looking for is this one from McKinsey, that it's very specific about this topic. Sorry.
Yeah, certainly. And actually the latest Harvard Business Review from February actually talks about this and the rise of digital nomads. I mean, this is a topic that's very much on the minds of people in that space. And they're talking about, the rise of digital nomads and the need for new services like ours, serving this market of people, that this is not going away. Sure, some companies are going back to the office, but you also have, I think one of the things that's easy to lose sight of is that we think about the sort of like employer in New York, for example, who had a bunch of employees in New York, and then suddenly when the pandemic happened and remote work happened, some of them were like, I'm going to move to Florida, right? Or someone from Germany is like, I'm going to move to Spain. It's cheaper and the weather's nicer. Why not, right? But what you also have now, because of all the EOR services and because companies were sort of overnight turned global and remote, is that they've also been able to hire, as you well know, from around the world, right? And so it's not just that like, hey, we have this team of people who are from this city and they're just sitting at home instead of going to the office. It's like we've now built these global teams with, we want the best workers from anywhere, not the best workers from 30 minutes around the office.
It does increase the competition. You are competing with the rest of the world, right? Which is, it's good for everyone, but you have to keep an eye on and understand how you want to manage that from the company's perspective, right? And that same study was telling that 24% of the people are ready to sacrifice between 10 and 20% of the salary to keep the ability to work from anywhere. Again, showcasing how this is important for this new economy that we live in. So yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you very much, guys, for that. Since you've mentioned now companies, I just want to ask you, Neville, like, do you have any analytics of the demand and how companies are actually seeing the value of what you're offering for their employees, and on the other side, how individuals are actually seeing the value there?
I don't have a statistic. You asked before about the strategy, so I can speak to the strategy, and
Yeah.
that sort of informs the other, and that is that basically we started with the individuals first.
Yeah.
That's a market that we saw was ripe and ready, whereas the companies have sort of come along a little bit later. But it goes to sort of the fundamentals in terms of how we think about health and insurance. And so one of the challenges that a lot of people have if they want to become freelancers, if they want to become digital nomads, I'm specifically thinking in the American case, but this is true now in many countries, is that you have private health insurance or some kind of supplemental insurance that you're getting from your employer, and then people leave those jobs and they lose that cover. And I know some employers kind of like that as like, you know, a way to retain people, but our perspective is we want to do what's best for the individuals who are covered. And so the idea is that we make insurance contracts with the individual people who are covered, right? Even in a family of four, each of the four people will have like their insurance. There'll be an insured person themselves. Now, we do have customers who are then reimbursed for, or they're billing their insurance directly to their employer, to the company, but we really tend to deal with the individual, because what we want is that it's their insurance and they can take it with them wherever they go in the world, and also even if their employer status changes. Now, maybe that'll change who's paying for it, but ultimately the contract is with the individual as opposed to an employer. That said, we do have demand from companies who are saying they want the kind of traditional B2B model where they say, look, I have 100 employees, they're in these 10 different countries. I don't have a solution for health insurance for them. Can you help us? But that is a market that's growing, certainly, but it's not the market we started with.
Yeah, got it. Basically, same as native teams, as Nico mentioned, because we started with myself as an individual, we were always towards the individuals, and we still are. And I just want to touch upon one topic here and want to hear your opinion on it. Do you feel like this is getting let's say a movement that the individual is actually the owner of his work habits, working hours, how much they want to get paid, how they want to get paid, where they want to get paid, what kind of a health insurance they say? I feel like the power is of employment and everything around working is now back in the individuals after the pandemic. And I know we've mentioned the pandemic a couple of times, but in a good way, because after that it became like a trend that the individual is the one who is dictating his work in a way. And I know when we were doing some research for native teams, companies would actually choose a provider, whether that's an employment provider or a health insurance provider, based on a reference from their employees. So they would say, we would go for the provider that the employee itself is going to choose, because that's what matters. The employee happiness and health is what matters, because only then they're productive in a way. Are you seeing this happening? What are your comments on it?
Yeah, Nico, do you want to take that first?
Sorry, guys, just unmuting myself. Yeah, we see that a lot. I think, as Alex mentioned, I think similar to you guys at Genki, we started by, even though we're in the OR space, which is nowadays mainly driven for companies, we started by looking at the needs that the employees have, right? What are the needs that the individuals are facing? Again, that brings us back to having that POV from the perspective of the individual, again, helping us understand what is actually they need in order to be able to perform better. And when it comes to dictating the way of work, I think it's shifting a little bit more into the employee individual side of things than from the companies. Again, for everything that we explained a bit, the pandemic helped to push things a little bit more on the employee side, on the way of working for necessity, not because the company wanted, but because it had to be this way. And we are realizing that, and this is something that was very strong to us and it still is, by targeting the individuals, they started referring us to the company, right? Look, I as an individual, I'm using native teams to collect my payments, but also to provide me with my employment agreement. And I would like the company to use native teams, not only for my colleagues, but also to be able to manage my financials a little bit better. So we saw that the employees were actually going back to the companies with the solutions like native teams that they found out by themselves, because this is what they wanted for their routine, for their own way of working. And this is still one of our highest conversion rates, comes from those employees that we close, that they are introducing us to their employers because they use this, they like it, they know their colleagues are going to like it as well, and they see that the company can benefit from having a company like Native Teams with them. So we are a testament that it is changing a bit, that the employees, individual workers, they have a little bit more power on deciding how they want to work and how they want to perform. Of course, this is not the same everywhere. It's not the same in every industry. It's not the same in every country. But we're seeing more and more industries and countries crossing that line on understanding a little bit more and adapting themselves to the way that individuals want to work. And this expands to everything, from the tools that they're using, from the technologies they want to use, from the companies, the health benefit companies, the e-wallets they are receiving. And for us, one of the things that we want to change moving forward is that Native Teams is the preferred way for you to receive your payments, your income, right? Regardless if it's from a contractor agreement, from an employment agreement, whatever it is that the employees really want, or the individuals really want to have us as their main and most safe source to receive their incomes, right? So I think, yes, it's changing a bit. There's still a long way to go, but we are a live testament to that.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, I work in marketing, and like my role within Genki is marketing. My background is marketing, and I think like when you have that sort of grassroots kind of like bottom up demand, that's fantastic. Within software, that's long been a strategy, right? Convince the developers at the beginning to code using your framework or whatever. Go to the meetups, get the university students using some new technology, and then eventually they'll be in the corporate world and they'll be demanding, hey, we got to code this thing and that because it's the fastest and that's what I know. It's really cool to see that that's actually working within your company as well. We've had a similar experience in the case of the teams that we provide insurance to on again, it's that sort of B2C kind of to B way, but where we have individuals who did the research themselves. Maybe they had like a stipend, or the boss said, oh yeah, no, go buy health insurance for yourself, whatever, here's the card, something like that. They went and found Genki, and then they told others, and so we ended up getting a bunch of people through the company, but even where it wasn't like official company policy, but they just, yeah, it's sort of word of mouth spreads within the company. But Alex, I think your question goes to something sort of more philosophical, and I'm sure if you actually have the data and you look at the data, probably most employee relationships haven't changed yet, or they're starting to change, but it's still slow. But I think at the margin, the best jobs, the type of work that we're talking about, right? We're both not only services for people who work remotely, but Native Teams and Genki, we're also both remote companies. Yeah. And there's like the tech side of that, like, yeah, we don't work from the office. We have all these technology tools that enable us to work this way. But again, I think there's also like a philosophical element to that, which is you're no longer paying people to show up at a specific desk from a specific time to a specific time and like occupy that chair and do whatever work comes in. Instead, you're treating each person, giving them more autonomy and saying, look, these are the deliverables, like this is what I need from you. Now please go and do that. And in the best companies that have run remote successfully for a long time, companies like Buffer and Automatic, who sort of like wrote the playbook, the ones that have been the most successful with it have given the employees like a very wide degree of latitude and treat them as giving them a lot of autonomy and say, this is the job we need done, now go and do it, right? So to your point about the individual versus the employer, it's less of a relationship of like, you sit here from when the whistle blows to when the whistle blows, and more like almost like the way, companies interact, like where you have a supplier and you say, hey, I need these 1,000 widgets by next month, here's the money. And you're giving someone a deliverable and then giving them the freedom to go and do it. And as part of that, yeah, offering them the benefits that they want, giving them flexibility to work from where they want, when they want to use the tools that make sense for them to do the job right. Like those are the best jobs as an employee generally, but also I think those are like the only jobs in a future with more and more automation. And I mean, I don't want to go going down like the whole AI rabbit hole, but like that sort of creative work is, I think, at some point the only work. And so we're all moving in that direction.
Yep, we are. I'm really happy for it, by the way. But thank you very much both for your inputs on this. Since you've mentioned digital marketing now, I'm just gonna go back a little bit on that. How are you adjusting your digital marketing strategies, Neville? I'll start with you, and then Nico, you can answer from our side as well, to successfully actually communicate the benefit of work-life balance and wellness programs to a wide range of audiences.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So our product, so our mission is to be a health partner for nomads, right? And that's a long-term, big picture mission. And we think of health very holistically in the sense of it's not just, you know, I broke my leg and I need to go to the emergency room, which is what a lot of the kind of like traditional travel insurance, which is not the same as what we offer, but it's kind of in the same sort of in the customer's mind, in the same category is what's offered. And so the way that we are doing that both on a product side and a marketing side is to try to offer not only, you know, you had an emergency and you need to get better, but to help people take care of their health, as I say, wherever they go in the world. And that means preventive care. But one of the things that also is involved in that is mental health. And it's the side that gets less focused on. But actually from my own experience and from knowing and talking to lots of digital nomads and remote workers, the probably most common issue, the thing that causes the most people to burn out, go back home, cancel the lifestyle, right, pull the plug on being a nomad and all of that, is actually mental health. It's loneliness, it's burnout, it's a lack of work-life balance, it's all of that. And so one of the things we do in our marketing is we talk about that. I've made YouTube videos about this. Sarah posts regularly on social media. We write a newsletter, and we also have something called the Genki Guide, which is basically a series of articles, including like kind of more practical destination information, like what to expect if you're going to Thailand and you're looking for a place to work remotely and how's the internet and all that stuff. But then also how to deal with things like loneliness and burnout and all of the mental health struggles that go along with this lifestyle that from the outside looking in, a lot of people aren't aware of those as, you know, part of the challenge that comes with this. And so we do our best to actually talk about that and to help our customers and the community as a whole to deal with that and to make it sustainable. Again, like it's easy for a few weeks or a month or two. It's more difficult and perhaps more rewarding long term.
Yeah, that is a really interesting way to put it, because I think the more you talk about it, the more aware we become of the things that are happening around us. And from my own experience, I would just confirm that even you don't have to travel, you don't have to be a digital nomad. You can just be a remote worker in your own city and feel those challenges as you just mentioned. So I think, as you rightly said, I will just confirm that mental health is really, really important when it comes to this, because I think these people are like a little bit more alienated from the rest of the I don't want to sound wrong, but not the rest of the world, but we are alienated because you stay at home, you work at home. After that, you are at home again. You don't, return from somebody. So the social life, it's a little bit different as well. So we have to be aware and follow the techniques and experiences of other people um, to have a healthier, let's say, life outside of work. Because when you are a freelancer or a digital nomad, a remote worker, you work when you're most productive. And sometimes that can be 24 hours a day. Sometimes it can be 0 hours a day. So it's really important to know how to make those things a little bit structured, let's say. Do you happen to have, and this is out of my curiosity, by the way, do you happen to have people that have challenges with routines? Because I know that I thought actually, and you let me know if this is something that you've seen when it comes to your customers. I thought that actually I want to escape from a routine, but once you escape from a routine, because freelancing is the best way to escape from a routine, but then sometimes I just feel like that's not the best thing that I could have done. That although I have the freedom, I have to have the routine, the self-discipline. It's what it lacks.
Yeah, that definitely hits close to home for me personally, and I think for probably all digital nomads and perhaps remote workers. Um, I've heard Tony Robbins say something like the number one human need. I'm going to mix up which one is number one and number two, but basically the number one and number two human needs are certainty and uncertainty, and I think that sort of applies
Yeah.
here also, right? As a digital nomad, it's like the main thing that we want is to break out of routine, and the main thing that we want to have once we become nomads or remote workers is routine. And so it's like you want to escape from this sort of like, sit in the traffic for an hour a day, commuting to your 9 to 5, sitting in a boring gray cubicle all day, no adventure, no excitement. You're kind of questioning, like, is this all there is to life? And then sitting in traffic again at the end of the day, like this kind of classic, routine and like, the 4 hour work week and all of that was written, and a lot of the um, aspirational messaging around becoming a digital nomad or just being a remote worker and is getting out of all of that and having the freedom to then live life on your own terms, travel the world, do all the fun things. And then you start to do that. And then you're like, oh, it's 5 p.m. and I've been sitting at the computer all day and I haven't even taken a shower and so on and so on. And because like when you strip out all of that structure, all of a sudden, all of the normal cues that you would have are gone, right? Like when you're sitting at your office, or let's say if you work in McDonald's, it's very clear that like while you're at McDonald's, you're working, and as soon as you like take off that uniform and the hat and you go home and whatever, you're not working anymore and you don't need to worry about it. If you're a freelancer, if you're a business owner, if you're an employee in sort of like a hard driving company culture, you probably have that spill over, from work into your home life. And certainly if you work from home, or if you're a digital nomad and you're traveling and working from wherever you are, then all of that follows you around. And suddenly all of the discipline of like, when should I work? When should I be at home? When am I mentally at home? When can I unplug
Yeah.
for the day? When do I stop checking the notifications? It's all on you. And many people find that, like, first of all, that's very difficult to manage. It requires a lot of discipline, in a sort of counterintuitive way, right? Discipline not to work is more the challenge. And it's something that a lot of people just don't have experience having done before, right? Most of us, whether it's school or traditional work, like there's some set of kind of guidelines or structure around what you're doing and when you do the activity and when the activity is over, and you graduate or you go from this grade to that grade, or it's summer break or whatever. And now we're always on all the time, and that's what leads to the burnout and the lack of work-life balance that I mentioned earlier. So yes, it's absolutely a challenge. It's something many of us experience firsthand.
Great. Thank you very much for answering that for me. And Nico, sorry that I elaborated a little bit more on this, but as I mentioned, I would like to hear your opinion also on how can digital marketing actual techniques be adjusted to successfully transfer the message, the value of the programs to a wide mass of audience when it comes to native themes now? What is our strategy there?
Yeah, no worries, Alex. This is part of the conversation. To be honest, I think my answer is not going to be too long because we do things very similarly to Genki in the way that Neville explained. For us, yes, we do invest on marketing many fronts, from events to ads to content. But the main goal here, especially with the content, is making sure that we are producing content that can actually help our potential customers or existing customers to, manage their financials or their employment status or the taxation in a better way, right? Because this is the core of what we do. Again, we think about our main philosophy, which is, becoming the preferred tool to receive payments for your work. We just don't want to be remembered or be there to help our ecosystem just when they receive an invoice or when the taxman comes, right? We want to make sure that we are helping them alongside the whole journey. So if we look at the customer journey, when they're searching and learning about remote working or what is the employment status or legality in a specific region, we want to be there to provide that help with them, being with webinars or video content or written content, but really making sure that we're trying to help along the whole journey and not just when they actually need our services. And a lot of that comes from something that we have been developing for a while, but it's very, very important, especially in our market with remote workers and digital nomads. It's a community, right? These are the kind of individuals that they already belong to a community. They exchange a lot between themselves. They learn a lot among each other. And we always try to be present on those communities to be able to help and provide knowledge as much as possible whenever it's needed, because this is where most of the knowledge is being shared and things are being discovered, right? And these are communities that really talk amongst each other a lot, and they have a lot of things to share because it's not something that comes by easily, right? So I think the main thing for us, besides everything that we do digital marketing wise, which is a lot, is how can we focus more on being present on those communities and be able to actually provide valuable help, right? I'm not trying to sell anything, but I'm just trying to, give you a piece of information that's going to help you with the challenge that you have at the moment. If you're going to need our services in the future or not, it's a whole different discussion, but I want to be there to help them whenever it's needed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank
that
you.
sounds very similar in mindset. I think it's that I mentioned a few times the idea of like Genki as a health partner, and it sounds like we have a similar outlook, right? That it's not just, a very transactional service that people are looking for, especially because, when you're doing something that's a little bit out of the ordinary, when your career doesn't look like your mom and dad's career, right? Because you've taken this kind of different path, when you're living in the country that you didn't grow up in, that your family's not from, and all of that, or you're changing countries constantly. In all those cases, what people are looking for is like more certainty, someone who has their back, someone who can tell them, yeah, this is how it works, don't worry, this is the situation, or here's what to look out for, things like that, beyond just the, here's your payroll, here's your paycheck, here's the invoice, whatever. Or in our case, like the insurance, ultimately at the end of the day, insurance is a financial product, right? It's like you pay money, and then if you have a bill later, it pays you money. But we layer a lot on top of that in terms of the guidance and the services and all that we've been talking about to create that feeling that like, yes, someone has your back. We've helped thousands of people like you. We know what you're going to experience. We've experienced it. They've experienced it. You benefit from that. And we can help you because we've seen these situations before.
Exactly. And actually, guys, my last question, which you already answered, was about the partnership between native teams and Genki and how we complement each other. If you want to give a last comment to it, please do. But you also both mentioned lots of things and why the two values that native teams, the native teams value and the Genki value, why are they combined and complement each other? But feel free to add any last comment on that one, because we are 3 minutes away from ending this beautiful and fruitful conversation. But if you have any other thoughts to give on this partnership, why we have done it, please do.
I think the main thing, sorry, Nev, the main thing about the partnership that I think it's a no-brainer. Our conversation today was just a testament to that, is that, being able to go for a combo like native teams and Genki gives you peace of mind all around, right? So it's a 360 protection in all of the ways that you can possibly imagine. Again, our goals in the end is to make the lives easier for the digital nomads or remote workers, regardless if it's focusing on health, if it's focusing on your financial health. The goal is to give you protection and peace of mind, and knowing that there is a company, there is a partner that it's thinking about that for you, so you don't have to think about it that often, right? And you can rely on. And I think that's why it's such a natural fit, because we are all trying to work and help the same individuals from different perspectives. So why not try to do this together? That's at least the way that I see this partnership. And again, this conversation today was just a testament to that.
Thank you. Yeah, not much further to add. I agree completely. I mean, I think if there's a takeaway for everyone listening, it's as simple as, like you can live this lifestyle, you can be a remote worker, you can live in another country from either where your employer is or where you grew up or where you live currently. You can travel around the world. And unlike in the past, where when you did that, you were basically on your own, you had to figure it all out for yourself, you earned your income in a way that maybe it was gray area, wasn't necessarily compliant, it was very difficult to register with any sort of local authority, you didn't have access to healthcare. Like, services like ours exist now to help you with all of those things. As I said, we've been through this before, we've helped thousands of people do this, so you can benefit from all of that. And just don't feel like the need that you need to either sacrifice those things or go it alone. We're here to help.
Amazing. Thank you very much. And I will say hi to Sarah. We'll miss her, but I promise we'll organize something again just to have her here as well. Thank you for all the participants. You will get the recording, as I mentioned already. And if you have any questions, the email that will go towards the recording will be your point of contact. So we'll get back at you ASAP. And my last question for all of you, are taxes good or bad for your health? Think about it and let me know. And if you know how to do it, good. If you don't, then bad. So really think about it. I'll leave you to your days with this question. But again, Nico and Neville, it was really lovely to have you here. It was a fruitful conversation, I think, for all of us. And I'm looking forward for our next webinar, to be honest. Have a
Thank you
great
so
week.
much. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you so much,
you.
Everyone.
Nabil, Alex.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye
Bye-bye.
bye. Bye everyone.